Hey everyone, welcome back. If you're listening to this, you're probably the kind of person who likes to tinker with their Android phone, just like me. Maybe grab an APK or two from APK Mirror every now and then.
It's the Android way, right?
Totally. But there have been some rumblings in the Android world lately, some pretty big changes. And I got to say, it's got some folks a little, well, concerned about the future of sideloading.
Yeah, definitely understand that. A lot of chatter going on.
Right. So we're diving into this Android Police article. The Wild West days of sideloading on Android are officially over. And wow, that title alone, right? It's enough to make you wonder if our days of easy APK downloads are numbered,
It's certainly provocative, gets your attention, that's for sure.
for sure. So to break it down, Google's been making it trickier to sideload apps. Not impossible, but definitely adding some hurdles.
Yeah, more like hurdles than roadblocks at this point, I'd say.
Okay, that's
Yeah.
a good way to put it. But why is Google doing this? Well, a lot of it boils down to some big legal stuff happening in the background. You've
Mm.
got the EU with its Digital Markets Act trying to even the playing field for app stores,
Right.
basically saying Google's got to give other players a chance.
Right. And then you have similar rulings from India's competition committee, too.
Yeah.
It's all about loosening Google's grip a bit.
Exactly. More competition, less control. But how does all of this legal stuff tie back to our beloved sideloaded apps? Well, this new policy in Android 15, and that's what this Android Police article dives into, could change the game. Basically, apps are going to be able to detect if they've been sideloaded and potentially, block certain features.
Yeah, that's a big one. And it's not just detection, they're restricting access to certain permissions for these apps too. Things like being able to read your SMS messages or get those admin privileges.
Which, if you rely on certain apps that haven't gone through the official Google Play Store ringer, it can be a bit of a punch in the gut.
Yeah, it really highlights how some people rely on side loading out of necessity, not just like as a cool thing they can do.
Right, right, totally.
Mm.
It's easy to forget that sideloading isn't always about convenience. It's about access for some people.
Exactly. And you see that in the comments. RO, for example, they're saying side loading isn't just a nice to have for them, it's essential. They depend on it for certain apps, for features they can't get anywhere else.
It makes you realize there's a whole other side to this.
Absolutely. Like, take Martin, another commenter. He had a real nightmare scenario where he switched to a new Pixel phone, needed to transfer a whopping 30 gigabytes of SMS data.
30 gigabytes of text messages? That's insane.
Right. And the only thing that saved him, a side-loaded app from F-Droid. This new policy, it could really leave people like Martin in a tough spot.
Wow, that really puts it into perspective. 30 gigabytes of messages. It makes you realize this isn't just about tech specs. There are real people who this impacts in big ways. But Google must have some pretty compelling reasons for all of this, right? It can't just be about keeping the EU and India happy, can it?
No, definitely not. There's more to it. I mean, yeah, they've got that legal pressure, but they're also playing the security card here and the user experience card.
Right, which always sounds good on paper.
Exactly. Their argument is that funneling everyone through official channels, through the Play Store, helps them crack down on those shady apps, keeps things safe and standardized.
No, for minute, right.
Always the balance, isn't it? Security versus how much control you're willing to give up.
Right, that age-old debate.
Hmm.
But I think that leads us perfectly into the big question, the elephant in the room. Are we witnessing the slow death of sideloading as we know it? Is the Wild West about to be tamed?
Well, let's just say the rumors of sideloading's demise might be a tad exaggerated, at least for now.
Okay, hold on. Now you've got my attention. Tell me more. So you're saying there's still hope for us sideloading, folks. Google's not going to, shut it all down completely.
Not quite. See, the Android community, they're a resourceful bunch. Always have been.
That's for sure. Where there's a will, there's a way, right? Or a workaround, at least.
Exactly. And we're already seeing those pop up in the comments like, Army of Gay Unicorns thinks this might just push people towards rooting and custom ROMs.
Ah, the classic route. For those who might not be familiar with those, though, can you break down what they actually are?
Sure. So think of rooting as like getting admin access to your Android device. You can bypass those built-in restrictions and really get under the hood.
So you're saying it's like having the keys to the kingdom.
Pretty much. You can install apps from outside the Play Store, mess with system settings, the whole 9 yards. And a custom ROM, that's like swapping out the entire operating system, the software that runs your phone.
So you're basically replacing what came pre-installed with something totally different.
Exactly. It gives you way more control and customization options. But, and this is a big but,
There's always a but, right?
always, it's not without risks. Like, you could void your warranty, and if you're not careful, you could even break your phone.
Yeah, turning your phone into a very expensive paperweight is never a good look.
Not at all. And like Gurvinder in the comments mentions that workarounds already exist for stuff like this. Like people have been doing this for ages to install Netflix on rooted devices, that sort of thing.
Right, right. But I feel like rooting, it's not exactly a walk in the park. It's not for the faint of heart, especially if you're just trying to use your favorite app without jumping through a bunch of hoops.
Totally agree. It's not the most user-friendly solution. And speaking of hoops, Dragon Loverlord makes a good point. These new restrictions, they might not mean apps can't use those permissions at all, just that you have to manually grant them for each side-loaded app.
So more of an annoyance than a total lockdown.
Potentially, yeah. It all kind of hinges on how Google decides to play this moving forward. Are they just making things a little less convenient to nudge people towards the Play Store? Or is this like a slippery slope?
Starting with a nudge, ending with a full-on roadblock.
Exactly. What starts as a minor inconvenience in Android 15 could snowball into something much bigger down the line. And you see that concern in the comments too. But, for example, is worried about this kind of like corporate overreach.
Right. That whole give them an inch and they'll take a mile thing. And this isn't just about workarounds or Google changing things up. This has much bigger implications for the whole Android ecosystem even.
Absolutely. Because with this move towards tighter control over sideloading Android, well, it starts to look a bit more like Apple's iOS, doesn't it?
Where sideloading is way more difficult, yeah.
Exactly. And, Morgan in the comments brings up a good point. They see it as a loss of freedom, like the freedom to actually control a device you own.
It's a valid point for sure. And it's not just about user freedom either. What about innovation? Are developers going to be as willing to try new things, build those unique apps, if they're forced to play by the Play Store's rules?
Right. It's something to think about. Look at what happened with Amazon's Fire tablets. My 1400 brings them up as an example of what happens when a company gets too controlling over its app ecosystem.
It can stifle creativity, lead to this really bland app landscape.
Exactly. And it's ironic, right? Because Android's open nature, its flexibility, that's a big part of what makes it so popular.
And now that very openness is being challenged. It's like this classic tech dilemma, security versus convenience versus freedom. We want it all, but it seems like something's got to give.
Right. So it begs the question, are there alternatives out there? Other ways to get those apps, explore different options.
Yeah, because it's not like it's Google Play or the highway, right? There are back roads, side roads, all that.
Exactly. And, thinking back to Martin and his 30 gigabytes of text messages, that app that saved the day, it came from F-Droid.
Ah, right. Tell us more about F-Droid. What is it exactly? So F-Droid, it's like the alternative app store, right?
Yeah.
For those who like to march to the beat of their own drum.
That's a good way to put it. It's all about open source software. So the code for those apps, it's out in the open. Anyone can look at it, tinker with it.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
So more transparency. But what's the catch?
Well, you might not find like every single mainstream app on there. It's definitely more niche, but that's kind of the beauty of it, right? Discovering those hidden gems, supporting developers who are really passionate about, user freedom and privacy.
Makes sense. So it's about being more conscious of the apps we use and where we get them. But let's bring this back to our listeners, right? If you're listening to this, you've probably sideloaded an app or two yourself. You get the appeal. So should you be worried? Is this the end of sideloading as we know it?
It's the big question, isn't it? And the short answer is no. At least not yet. Sideloading's not gone. It's just going to take a little more effort.
More of a speed bump than a roadblock.
Exactly. Think of it like Google's adding a few more guardrails on that open road. You can still enjoy the scenic route.
But you might hit some detours along the way.
Right. And this is just the beginning, right? We have to see what Google does with sideloading in the future. Do they loosen their grip or double down?
It's like, what's that expression? Give them an inch and they'll take a mile.
Exactly. It's a developing story, and we're all part of it in a way.
Right. And Fitsum in the comments made a good point saying, Android's open nature is its advantage. This whole thing really highlights that, doesn't it? That tension between convenience and control.
Totally. And it really comes down to us, the users, to decide what we value more, right? What we're willing to give up for that convenience.
Because there are always trade-offs.
Always. And sometimes just knowing about those trade-offs, being aware of them, that's half the battle.
Knowledge is power, right? The more we understand about these changes, the better equipped we are to make those decisions for ourselves.
100%. And hey, you might even discover your next favorite app on F-Droid. Who knows? There's a whole world of open source software out there.
There you go. Always be exploring. And that's a wrap on this deep dive. We've covered a lot of ground, talked about the changing landscape of sideloading, the implications, the alternatives. And as always, we want to hear from you. What are your thoughts on all of this? Head over to the comments. Let's keep this conversation going.